Hello, this is Elisha Ubi. Today we'll be starting the last chapter of Hilchot Shehita that is dealing with the various terefot that make an animal prohibited to be eaten. This chapter, in the previous chapter, we concluded in listing all the terefot. Now, in this chapter, we'll be dealing with cases in which there is a safek, in which there is a doubt about terefa and how we treat these cases of doubt. Following which, Rabbeinu will uh, introduce various customs that have become widespread in Israel today, and amongst Jews today, um, as well as in his time. And these customs, although they are not uh, legally obligatory by Talmudic law, they have become widespread custom that all Jews have practiced uh, even since the times of the Geonim and possibly since the times of the Talmud as well. Um, okay, so with that, I'll begin chapter 11. הלכה א' כל בהמה או חיה או עוף שנולד בהן ספק טרפה מטרפות אלו, כגון בהמה שנאפלה ולא הלכה, או שנטרפה ביד חיה ואין ידוע אם העדים הבשר כנגד בני מעיים או לא העדים, או שנחפשה גולגולתה ואין ידוע אם מרובה או מיעוטה, וכיוצא בדברים אלו. אם היה זכר ושהה 12 חודש, הרי זו בחזקת שלמה כשאר כל הבהמות, ואם הייתה נקבה עד שתלד. ובעוף בזכר 12 חודש, ובנקבה עד שתלד כל הביצים של הטעינה הראשונה, ותטעון טעינה שנייה ותלד. Okay, הלכה א', every animal, domesticated animal or undomesticated animal or bird, which has one of these cases of terefa out of doubt, of from any of the terefot that we have seen, such as, for example, an animal that fell from a roof and did not walk, which is considered a case of safek, of doubt, until we do certain checks, as we've already explained in chapter 9, I think it was. Or if it was attacked by an animal, and it's not, and by a predator, and we don't know uh, whether the flesh opposite the organs became red or not, which, as we saw, I think in chapter 5, that this redness is the sign that indicates that the animal was attacked and makes it prohibited, or if its skull were crushed, but we don't know if it were crushed in a majority of the skull or only in a minority of the skull. And so too anything like these of all other cases of doubt regarding terefot. In any of these cases of doubt, we do the following check. If the animal were a male, then we wait 12 months. Uh, if it remained alive after 12 months, then this animal has a presumption of being whole and healthy like all other animals. Because we say if it were a terefa, it would have died within the 12 months. If the animal is a female, then we wait until it gives birth. So if right, so if the animal's pregnant, we wait till it gives birth, and then it is kshira. Um, if, however, we're dealing with a bird, then in the male also we wait 12 months. In the female, we wait until it hatches, or it hatches all of the eggs of one of its clutches, and that it starts to lay uh, a second clutch, a second like batch of eggs, and gives birth to them. Meaning, so the way that that a hen uh, lays eggs. So a hen usually lays one egg every day, and it takes usually between 24 to 27 hours for a hen to lay an egg. So if today it laid its egg on at 7 o'clock, 7 in the morning, so the next day it'll lay around 9 in the morning or 8 in the morning or something like that. And then after that, 10, 11 in the morning, etc., etc. And it will keep doing this. There are different types of hens. A hen that is considered brooding. A brooding hen is one that is currently laying and with the intention of hatching these eggs. So a hen that's brooding will do this and uh, produce a number of eggs in this way. And once it finishes laying a certain number of eggs, that batch of eggs is called a clutch. Once it lays that clutch of eggs, then the brooding hen stops laying eggs and lay and sits on the eggs, hoping for them to hatch. And it does this for a period of about 21 days. It sits on the eggs and it does not lay any new eggs. And then once the eggs hatch, it'll then return to its cycle of laying eggs again every day. And that would be the second uh, clutch, the second ta'ina in that this halakha is describing. Uh, so we wait that it finishes one whole clutch and hatches them. Some of them will hatch into chicks, some will not, and then it does a whole second cycle. After the whole second cycle, then we say that it is kshira. الخبيث ואסור למכור ספק טרפה זו לגוי בתוך זמן זה, שמא ימכרנה לישראל. And it is prohibited to sell any case of a doubt of terefa to a non-Jew in this period of time, right? Because in this period of time, since the animal is a safek, it is still prohibited to eat it. Uh, and even though the non-Jew is not prohibited to eat it, we may not sell it to the non-Jew because he might sell it to a Jew after us. And then the Jew will eat a case of safek terefa. כל בהמה חיה ועוף בחזקת פריעין הן, ואין חוששים להן שמא יש בהן טרפה. לפיכך כשישחטו שחיטה כשרה, אינן צריכים בדיקה שמא יש בהן אחת מן הטרפות, אלא הרי הן בחזקת היתר, עד שיוולד להן דבר שחוששים לו, ואחר כך בודקים על אותו דבר בלבד. Okay, this halakha is a very important halakha and establishes a primary principle in the laws of terefot. Any animal, a domesticated animal, undomesticated animal, or bird, right, all animals have a presumption of being healthy. Okay, this is unlike what we saw in the case of a nevela, where all animals have a status of a nevela until a proper shehita is done, and then the shehita removes the status of nevela from the animal and makes them permitted to be eaten. Unlike in the case of the nevela, in the case of a terefa, we always assume that the animal is healthy until something makes us think otherwise. Okay, so all animals are presumed to be healthy, and we do not suspect regarding them that they might have one of these terefot. Therefore, if they are slaughtered, a valid slaughtering, we do not need to do any checks that they might have, that maybe they have one of these terefot. Rather, they remain in their presumption of being permitted to be eaten until something occurs that causes us to suspect it. And only if something like that arises that we then suspect regarding it, then we must check on that same issue alone, like only on that issue, right? So we saw a list of 70 terefot. We do not need to check every animal that we slaughter for all 70 of those terefot. In fact, we don't need to check for any of those 70 terefot. Only if something occurs that makes us suspect that one of them might have happened, then we need to check to make sure that same terefa did not occur. Anachad Dalet, Kesad. Now Rabbeinu will explain, I will give a few examples of this. כיצד? כרון של נשמת הגף של העוף, בודקים את הריאה שמא נקרבה. So how so? Like, what are some examples? Such as if the wing of the bird were detached or dislocated, or removed, and as we saw in the previous chapter, a wing that gets detached from the body, we suspect regarding the bird that its lung may have been punctured. Right? So how so? If the wing were detached, we check the lung uh, lest it may have been punctured. That's one example. Second example. أكلها بهما بودقين أوثاه شما نفرسق وإذارها. So if an animal fell, then we check to make sure that its organs were not crushed. Third example, نتروسس أيسم هروش بودقين شما نقاف بغم شلموح. If the skull were we check to make sure that the membrane of the brain, so the meninges of the brain, were not punctured. Uh, now, a fourth example, هيكا أوثاه قوس أو نزرق بحيس أو مرمح وخيوسي بهن ونخنس لحلله حوششين له وصرخة بدقة كنجد كل حلال شم نقاذ אחד מן האיברים שתתערף בנקבתן וכן כל כיוסי בזה. So a fourth example, if an animal was hit a by a point, by some like needle or something, like something sharp, or someone threw at it an arrow or a spear or anything like this, and the point entered into the cavity of the animal, right? So the body of the animal. So now we suspect, and we have to check the entire body of the animal to see if one of the organs that if it were punctured becomes makes the animal terefa. That we check these organs to to see that they were not punctured. Right. So this includes the lung, the heart, stomachs. So everything that is in either the thoracic cavity or the abdominal cavity in the main body of the animal. And so to any other case like this, right? If something occurs that makes us suspect, we have to check that thing which we suspect. לפיכך, ראה שהעילת צמחים או שנמצאו סירחות כמו חוטים שתלויים ממנה ולדופן או ללב או לטרפש הכבד, חוששים לה שמא נקבה ושריחה בדיקה, וכן אם נמצא בה אבעבוע מלא לך, חוששים שמא נקב סימפון שתחתיו ושריך בדיקה. So therefore, if a lung brought forth like these hairs, right? Like um, which we talked about in chapter 7 when we discussed the ra'ah of the lung, or if we find in the lung adhesions that are like these, which we also discussed. So these adhesions are that are like strings that attach from the lung to the chest wall, or to the heart, or to the diaphragm. So in these cases, we suspect that the lung may have been punctured, and we have to check the lung. Right. So if we are looking at the lung and we see that it has one of these things, then we must check the lung. And by check, okay, then let's check the lung. And so too, if we find that the lung has an avabua, like a bubble, which are called bulbs, right? Or right, like a bulb, or that is like this little bubble that has air in it, or that might have fluid or some other things, right? So if we find a bulb that is filled with fluid, then we also suspect that one of the bronchioles that are under it, or the alveola that's under it, that it may have been punctured, and that must be checked as well. הלכה ו' מן הדין היה על דרך זו שאם נמצאת הריאה תלויה בסרחות כמו חוטין, אם היו מן האום של הריאה ולדופן, או שהיו ללב או לטרפש הכבד, וחותכים את הסרחה ומוציאים את הריאה ונופחין אותה בפושרין, אם נמצאת נקובה טרפה, ואם לא נפגע באייה המים, הרי היא שלמה מכל נקב ומותרת, ושיחה זו לא הייתה במקום נקב, או שמא נכתב חירום שהעליון בלבד. Okay. Now Rabbeinu explains that according to everything that we have just said, the law in this way should be regarding the lung that if we find that the lung has adhesions that are like these strings, so if these adhesions are from the from the bottom, from the larger lobe on the bottom of the lung, um, if they are from the to the chest wall, or to the heart, or to the diaphragm, then what we should do is we should cut the adhesion, and then we take out the lung from its place in the thoracic cavity, and we should place it in lukewarm water and blow it up. If we find, right, and then right, if we find that it is punctured, it is a terifa, right? So we blow into the trachea or into the windpipe to blow up the lung, and and then if the water starts to bubble, so this is a sign that there is a that there is a puncture in the lung, and then we say that it's a terifa. But if the water does not bubble, then we know that it is whole and contains no punctures, and then the animal is permitted, and that this adhesion was not caused by a puncture, or alternatively, it was only the um, outside membrane that was punctured, and not the uh, the lower membrane, um, right, as we have discussed also in I think it was in chapter 6 that the lung has two membranes that cover it. Right, I think they're called the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura, right? The that make up the pleural sac of the lung. Um, okay. All right. So alternatively, it could be that only the the parietal pleura was punctured, but the pleura that was closer to the lung, the visceral pleura, was not punctured. And in order for it to be a terefa, the puncture needs to go through both. Okay. Now רבנו says, ומעולם לא ראינו מישהו הורה כך, ולא שמענו מקום שעושים בו כך. החזיים, ואף על פי שאלו הן הדברים הנראים מדברי חכמי התלמוד. So Rabbeinu says, and we have never seen anyone ever who taught thus, right? Who taught that this is how that this is the law that should be implemented in practice. Nor has he ever heard of a place that acts in this way. That this is the custom of how they behave regarding the lung. And then in Halacha he says, and this is even though that this is what seems to be the law from the words of the sages of the Talmud, right? Even though this is the Talmudic law, he never heard of any place that acts in this way. And now Rabbeinu will say what the widespread custom, and this custom is also how it is practiced today, what the custom in Israel is. המנהג הפשוט בישראל כך הוא, כששוחטין את הבהמה או את החיה, קורעים את התרפש של הכבד ובודקין את הריאה במקומה. אם לא נמצאת תלויה בסירחה, או שנמצאת סירחה מאוזני ריאה ולבשר במקום רביסתה, בין בשר שבין הסלעות, בין בשר שבחזה, או שנמצאת סירחה מאוזן לאוזן על הסדר, או מן האום לאוזן הסמוכה לה, הרי אלו מתירין אותה. Okay, the widespread custom in all of Israel is as follows. When we slaughter the domesticated animal or the undomesticated animal, we rip open uh, the diaphragm, right? The lung is on the other side of the diaphragm. We rip open the diaphragm and we check the lung in its location. Um, right? We saw in a previous, oops, sorry. We saw in one of the previous chapters um, how the butchers cut a hole into the diaphragm that they can then stick their hands into the thoracic cavity and check the lung while it's still in its location, right? Before removing the lung, right? So they check the lung in its location without removing it. If we find that it does not have any uh, any adhesions, or even if we do find an adhesion, but the adhesion is sticks from one lobe to another lobe, uh, right? Uh, sorry, if we find that the adhesion sticks from one of the lobes of the lung to the flesh in the that is on top of it, uh, regardless of whether it is flesh that is between the ribs or flesh that is a part of the hazed, as a part of the chest. Uh, okay, so that's option two. Option three, if we find that an adhesion stuck was stuck from one of the lobes to another one of the lobes, but in order, uh, right? So the first lobe to the second lobe, or the second lobe to the third lobe, or from the لأذن السمخانة, or if from the bottom lobe to the lobe that is next to it. So the bottom, uh, the larger lobe, um, right? The larger lobe to the lobe that is um, that is next to it. Um, right. The Okay. So then, in these cases, we say that the animal is permitted. For 1 second. Right. Okay. Right. So the bottom lobe, the of the re'ah, right? We said is called the caudal lobe. The caudal lobe, which is the larger lobes on the bottom of the lung. If it is stuck to the middle lobe in the right lung, or to the caudal part of the cranial lobe in the left lung. Right? So the lobe that is right next to it. So in all of these cases, the animal is permitted. הנחה ח' ואם נמצא חוט יוצא מן האום של הריאה לאיזה מקום שיימשך, או אפילו היה כחוט השערה, אוסר אינו נופע. But if, on the other hand, we find a string that comes out from the shel from the caudal lobe, to any other place that it might stretch to, and even if this string were as thin as a piece of hair, then we prohibit the animal. We say that is a terefa. Right. So the previous halacha was referring to a sircha that comes out from one of the unot shel from one of the or oznaim shel hareot, right, from any one of the lobes other than the caudal lobe. Whereas if we find that in those cases we permit it, uh, if it's in the conditions that we saw in the previous halacha. But if, on the other hand, there is a sircha from the caudal lobe, from the larger lobe on the bottom, then we prohibit it. unless, as we saw in the previous halakha, unless the adhesion goes from the caudal lobe to the lobe that is immediately next to it. Only in that case is it permitted. הלכה ט' וכן, אם היה מן הריאה חוט משוך ללב או לתרפש הכבד, או לכיס הלב או לוורדה, בין שהיה חוט מן האום של הריאה, בין שהיה מן האוזן, ואפילו היה כחוט השערה, אוסרין אותה. And so too, if we find that there is a string that stretches from the lung to the heart, or to the diaphragm, or to the case that envelops the heart, like the sac that envelops the heart, which is called the pericardium. Okay, just like the lung has a sac, so too the heart has a sac. Right, lechis alev, לתרפש הכבד to the diaphragm. Or if it goes to the varda was the accessory lobe that is on the ventral side of the lung, right? The side of the lung facing the bottom of the animal, right? The chest of the animal, right? So if so in these cases, if the adhesion goes from the lung to any of these things, regardless of whether the adhesion is from the from the caudal lobe, or even if it were from any of the upper lobes, and even if the adhesion were as thin as a strand of hair, in any of these cases, we say that the animal is prohibited. And so too, if we find that there is an adhesion that connects the accessory lobe to its sac, right? To the mediastinal recess is the sac that encloses the accessory lobe. Or if we find right, so either that it is stuck to it, or if there is a one string that attaches them, then also we say that it is prohibited. وحوت يسمى أذن لأذن شلون السدر وسرينوتا. And so too a string that comes out from one of the lobes to another one of the lobes of the lung, but not in order. So the first lobe to the third lobe, or the second lobe to the fourth lobe, then we also prohibit it. Okay, so this is the widespread custom in all of Israel. הלכה י' יש מקומות שמנהרם אם מסעו סירחה מן האוזן לבשר ולעצם שבצלעות, והסירחה דבוקה בשתיהן, אוסרין אותה. ואבא מורי זכר צדיק לברכה מן האוסרין, ואני מן המתירין. ומיעוט מקומות מתירין אפילו נדבקה בעצם לבדו, ואני אוסר. Okay. We saw in one of the previous chapters that an adhesion that goes from the lung to one of the bones of the rib cage, that this is prohibited. That the bone of the rib cage, because it's hard, is not considered sufficient to seal the puncture and to seal the puncture. If, on the other hand, the sircha, the adhesion, connects not to the bone of the rib cage, but rather to the flesh that is between two of the ribs, then it is permitted. In this halakha, Rabbeinu is talking about a case where the adhesion is in the middle and sticks to both of them, to both the flesh and the bone. So there are places that had the custom that if they found an adhesion from one of the upper lobes of the lung that connected to both the flesh and the bone that's in the rib cage, that's in one of the ribs, and that the adhesion is stuck to both of them, that in this case they prohibit it. And Rabbeinu says here that his father, Rabbeinu Maimon, the father of Maimonides, uh, may his memory be a blessing, that he was of one of the people who also said that this is prohibited. And Rabbeinu says that he is one that Maimonides is one of the people who permitted it. Right. So here Rambam disagrees with his father. His father prohibited this, and Rambam permitted this. All right, 1 second. Okay. And there are a minority of cases, Rabbeinu continues to say, that permit it, even in a case where the adhesion connects only to a bone and doesn't connect to the flesh at all. And Rabbeinu says that he is one of the people who prohibits this, right? So he disagrees with this minority position. ויש מקומות שנופחים את הריאה שמא יש בה נקב, ברוב המקומות אין נופחים, והרי לא נולד דבר שגורם לחשש. ומעולם לא נפחנו ריאה בספרד ובמערב, אלא אם נולד לנו דבר שחוששים לו. Rabbeinu says another custom that some places had. There are some places that blow up the lung lest it has a puncture. But most places do not blow it up, since there was no instance that caused us to suspect that it might have a puncture. And now Rabbeinu also says that never has he ever seen a lung in Spain or in the whole West, right? So in Morocco and northwestern Africa, that in all of these places, he has never seen a lung that has been blown up in such a scenario, that this is just the default. They blow up the lung, unless there was a reason to suspect this lung of being punctured. Okay, right? Rather, that the check that they do in the lung is just that they check it while it's still in its location, when it's still it's stuck in its place. They check the lung then to see that it has no adhesions, but they don't do this check for any lung of any animal that has been slaughtered. ודברים אלו כולן אינן על פי הדין, אלא על פי המנהג כמו שביארנו, ומעולם לא שמענו במי שבדק עוף, אלא אם נולד לו חשש. And all of these things, right, all of these different customs that Rabbeinu just explained, none of them are mandatory by law. Rather, they are all a matter of custom, as we have explained. Right, and by law, the lung does not need to be checked, just like all the other organs that are not checked. So too, the lung does not need to be checked unless there's a reason that made us suspect it, and that we think that it needs to be checked. But if there is no reason, it does not need to be checked. But because puncture in the lung is the most common of the terefot, Jews all over the world have had this custom of checking the lung to make sure that it doesn't have a terefa, as in one of the cases that we've explained. Right. So all these differences of opinion are not significant since they're all a matter of custom. The only thing that is significant is that once we do the whatever checks we do, that if we find that there is something wrong, that we go in accordance with the halakha. ומעולם לא שמענו במי שבדק עוף אלא אם נולד חשש. And all these checks are only regarding the animal. We have never heard of anyone who has checked a bird unless there is a reason to suspect. Right? So even today, we don't check the lung of a bird to make sure that it's not terefa, in the same way that we check the lung of an animal. הלכה י"ג מי ששחט את הבהמה וקרע את הבטן, וקודם שיבדוק את הריאה, בא כלב או גוי ונטל את הריאה והלך לו, הרי זו מותרת, ואין אומרין שמא נקובה הייתה הריאה, או שמא דבוקה הייתה, שאין מחזיקין איסור, אלא הרי זו בחזקת היתר, עד שיובדע במה נטרפה. Okay. Halakha 13. Someone who slaughtered an animal and then rips open the stomach, right, to check the lung. But before he was able to check the lung, a dog or a non-Jew or anyone else came and removed the lung and ran away, such that we were not able to check the lung. This animal is permitted. Right, since we have just seen that we do not have to check the lung, rather it's only a custom to check the lung. So if we do not have the option of checking it, then the animal is permitted since it has a presumption of being permitted, of being healthy. And we do not say that lest this lung may have been punctured, or we don't say lest it might have been stuck with adhesions, and which also could have prohibited it. And all this is because we do not presume something. We do not presume a prohibition in the cases of terefot. Rather, this animal is in a presumption of being permitted until something comes and causes us to think that it is a terefa. וכשם שאין חוששים לקרום מוח חול השדרה וכיוצא בהן, כך לא נחוש לרעה שאבדה. And so too, just as we don't suspect regarding the membrane of the brain, right, the meninges of the brain, or to the spine, or any of the other organs, right, anything else like this, so too, we do not need to suspect for a lung that went missing. ואין בזה מנהג, שדבר שאינו מצוי, אין בו מנהג, right? And here we may go according to the Talmudic law, since there is no custom regarding this, since it's not something that happens frequently, and we do not have customs regarding things that are infrequent. הלכה י"ד בא הגוי או הישראלי והוציא את הריאה קודם שתתבדק, והרי היא קיימת, נופחין אותה, אף על פי שאין אנו יודעים אם היו שם סמכים או לא היו, מפני פישוט המנהג. If a non-Jew or a Jew came and took out the lung before it was checked, right, before it was checked in its location, right? So if it would have had a if it had an adhesion or something like this, right, that caused the lung to be stuck to the rib cage, the diaphragm, or anything else. So here the person pulled the lung out of its place, so it can't really be checked anymore, since they were pulled out. Right, but if in this case the lung is still there, right, we still have it. It wasn't taken away like in the previous halakha. Then we still may check it by blowing it up, right? By putting it in lukewarm water and blowing it up to see if the water bubbles. And even though we do not know if it had these hairs or did not have, still we must check it because of the because of the custom that has become widespread. Right, the custom of checking the lung. הלכת ט"ו יש מקומות שאם ימצאו סירחות מדולדלות מן הריאה, אף על פי שאינן דבוקות לא לדופן ולא למקום אחר, אוסרין אותה. בדבר זה הפסד גדול הוא ואיבוד לממונם של ישראל, ומעולם לא נהגו זה בצרפת ולא בספרד, ולא נשמע זה במערב, ואין ראוי לנהוג במנהג זה, אלא נופחין אותה בלבד. אם נמצאת שלמה מן הנקב, הרי זו מותרת. There are some places that if they found a sircha, an adhesion that was hanging, right, meaning that it was hanging from the lung, but it was not stuck to anything, right? So it may have been stuck to something, but it came apart at some point during the life of the animal. So now there's just an adhesion that's flinging around. Even though it's not stuck not to the chest wall and not to any other part, not to the diaphragm or heart or anything else, that these places used to prohibit this lung as well, even though there's no law that prohibits this kind of a lung. And the Rabbein says this is a large loss, a large financial loss, and causes Jews to lose a lot of their money. And because a terefa in an animal is a very large financial loss. And Rabbeinu says that that this was never customary, not in France nor in Spain, and it was never heard of in North Africa, and it is not fit to have this custom. Rather, in such a case where we find these sichot, these adhesions that are just flopping around, in these cases we should blow up the lung and check. If we see that it is whole and does not have any puncture, then we permit it. With this, we conclude chapter 11.